Correct. PDF. There are two actions there. They're entirely related. But with that, I would just turn it over to Director Conklin, Director Dyson, and Chief Jones to talk about the to go through their PowerPoint.
Very good. Gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you.
We're going to take this in a couple different steps. I'm going to set up some of the overall context, and then my colleagues from the Department of General Services are going to talk specifically about the proposal that's before you today for the amendments. About 18 months ago, we submitted a grant application to the Federal Transit Administration under their zero-emission bus, low-no bus and bus facilities grant program, which they've combined, seeking support for implementing a hydrogen fueling site at our Gaithersburg depot. And for the match, which is the ride-on bus fleet component of this, we were proposing providing the buses as part of the county match and the already appropriated funds in that PDF. So we submitted that application, and we were fortunate to be awarded that grant application, which is the federal funds that are included in this supplemental appropriation for the hydrogen bus grant. And you may ask, why were we interested in hydrogen? Well, we had been looking at a zero emissions bus transition plan, and in the early days of this, we're able to identify that the battery electric buses, which we have been purchasing for some time now, are only able to serve about half of the ride-on route structure. So to transition all of that fleet to battery electric bus at the current technology performance, we were looking at either having to have buses return to the depot midday or doing 2-for-1 buses, so that we would always have a bus with a full charge able to hit the other half of the route. And that obviously has major implications for the workforce and the operations plan and the scheduling and everything that the public experiences. So we started to look at what other agencies were doing, and we started to see that many agencies were proposing a blended fleet for hydrogen and battery electric to meet their needs. And we started to look a little bit further into that hydrogen capacity, and then we're seeing that this was a hopeful path forward for some of our other heavy-duty fleet, like highway services vehicles that need to be in service for longer durations of time, and in storm events and other emergencies, we can't call them back for a charging interval. So we again talked with our colleagues at the Department of General Services to understand their take on this technology, and then submitted the grant application. And like I said, we were awarded that grant application, which is, I believe, I don't have the number in front of me, but I believe it's 13 vehicles. Yeah. And the federal match is for the fueling infrastructure. And it's actually coupled with other work the Department of General Services is doing at the Gaithersburg facility to generate the green energy associated with this program. So that's why we've pursued this, and we're happy to have been awarded this. Got a lot of support from our congressional delegations, the council, and others to bring this forward. And this is good news for us in testing this technology out. In the long run, we think we will have at least 2 different fuel types for zero-emission buses, the battery electric, which we're well underway on, in this fuel type, and possibly we are also investigating the idea of renewable natural gas generated from food waste composting and other green uses of that. But we are not quite there in understanding what those future sources might hold for this. And generally, they're a substitute for hydrogen and have a lot of the same performance characteristics hydrogen does. So we're excited about this, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Dias.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin. Let me begin by recognizing my chief of our Division of Fleet Management Services, Calvin Jones, to my left. And Calvin is our expert on all things related to hydrogen vehicles, and has been involved in our planning for this facility and this use for well, since you were in kindergarten, right? So anyway, Director Conklin's given a great introduction, and some of the things he said are mentioned in this presentation, but I wanted to comment on some things that Councilmember Glass pointed out as far as this discussion. This is really the first discussion the Council's had regarding the whole concept of hydrogen fueling and other similar Buck Rogers type technologies. And part of the reason is because this is pretty new. And in fact, the facility that we're going to be talking about, this particular project, is unique among the nation. This will be the first ever hydrogen electrolyzed facility powered by solar panels as a microgrid, It is unique to the nation. It's one of the largest facilities of its type in the country, even without the solar panels. So this is an example of Montgomery County leading and taking some initiatives that, frankly, jurisdictions across the country have only been talking about for some time. So we're very excited and hopeful about this. So we have a little presentation for you. It won't take long. And as I said, some of it's pretty intuitive, but I think it's very exciting, something that with the council's aggressive support and the county's green initiatives, something I think will be delighted to give you updates on in the future. So with that, I'm going to turn to the presentation that you have in front of you and start with this first. Go back to the first page, the intro, because I wanted to talk about that picture. Can we go backwards? Yep. There we go. This is a picture of the future, the Equipment Maintenance and Transportation Center, affectionately known as MTOC, or the David F. Bone facility that's mentioned in your packet. This is a facility located on Shady Grove Road, right near the ICC, backs onto the ICC, which is what you see in the lower right corner. This is going to shows the future impact of the creation of installation of solar arrays on top of the garage, around the perimeter of the properties. Basically, if there's a square foot we can put a solar panel on top of, we're going to do it. And that's we're in the discussions with our partner on that project, Alpha Structure. It'll do more than just power the hydrogen generation plant, but it'll also generate electricity for electric buses, which will also be operating out of this facility, as well as the facility itself. This is a tremendous project, and the planning for the solar array is well underway, and design is in process now. We actually expect construction to begin within the next few months.
Construction actually, equipment laid down is in the next 2 months. Construction starts in March.
There you go. So it's well underway. All right, next slide. So just as an overview, I hate to read slides, so you know where we're at. We have some aggressive climate goals. As Director Conklin pointed out, we're going to start off with 13 fuel cell buses, as well as an aggressive microgrid, which is what those solar panels are all about. This will be the 5th microgrid that Montgomery County has constructed at its major facilities. Others include our public safety headquarters, which routinely pushes power back into the grid. It's very successful. The recently completed and literally world-renowned microgrid at our Brookville bus maintenance facility. We have visitors from all over the planet coming to take a tour of that. It's so innovative. Other microgrids include our animal shelter and some of our neighborhood recreation centers. So Montgomery County is well on the way in exploring and implementing microgrid technology. The benefit of a microgrid is it makes the facility independent of the grid. For instance, when we reopened the animal shelter as a microgrid, coincidentally, the week after we opened it, there was an airplane that flew into a tower right near the airport, and the entire area was out of power except for the animal shelter, which was operating off of a microgrid.
In the news,
Yeah,
that aspect. I mean, everything else was in the news.
yeah, that wasn't. Yeah, but that's again, it's a smart idea, and we're aggressively implementing. Next slide. So why hydrogen fuel cell buses? Again, Director Conklin's pointed a lot of this out. Certainly zero emissions technology, the nature of hydrogen fuel cells. This is basically an electric bus, but it's powered by hydrogen, which provides power to the batteries. And it gives the bus a longer travel distance. Clearly, it creates a better performance, not only for our buses, but also for our heavy vehicles. And we're actually have been exhaustively looking for options when it comes to our highway trucks, our major large vehicles that are hauling a lot of load. Electric batteries wouldn't do. So this is an exciting technology for us all the way around. And it's green. Director Conklin mentioned that we are looking at other technologies, and we are. But one of the main reasons that we wanted to go with an on-site electrolyzer is that the availability of getting green hydrogen is the infrastructure simply isn't there at this time, which necessitates the installation of an electrolyzer. Now, before we move to the next slide, I'm reminded.
Real quick, if I could just ask about this slide.
Yeah, sure.
The second to bottom point, and this might be to you or Director Conklin, 23 routes of the 127 routes currently operated are with electric. Is that right? Just so I understand.
Our electric operation is from the Brookville Depot currently, and that's probably about right. We've got 14 battery electric buses in service right now.
Great. Thanks.
Now, years ago, I remember a Saturday Night Live skit where they were trying, I think it was on Weekend Update, trying to explain how nuclear power worked. And the image they used was a nuclear reactor with a power cord going to a toaster, right? So this is a little bit more complicated than that. Let's go to the next slide, just to explain how a fuel cell operates. And we're not going to dwell on this. If I let Calvin speak to this, we'll be here for a while. But essentially, we're converting hydrogen into electricity, and it's very straightforward. But it's a fantastic technology where it's separating the H and the O, and the hydrogen cells are then moved into and separated from the oxygen cells, which are then combined back in the back process, and so it converts back to water vapor, and the only tailpipe emissions is water. It's quite an amazing technology. And of course, the process of separating the hydrogen atoms out of the water generates the power. Is that simple enough,
Simple
Mr.
enough.
Jones? Okay.
Simple enough, simple enough.
See what it looks like in a vehicle, the next slide just shows the same concept and how it'll operate in a car or a bus, with the hydrogen tank feeding hydrogen to the fuel cell, which separates the atoms and converts the power to electricity, which then operates the motor, and any excess energy is stored in the battery on the vehicle. So it's pretty straightforward stuff when you look at it simple. I hesitate to minimize it because it really is pretty amazing what's happening. Next slide. The process laid out, as you see here on this slide, points out that we're starting, in our case, not with windmills, but with photovoltaic panels. The site picture that you saw at the beginning of this presentation, all of those fuel cells, or all of the solar panels, equate 5 megawatts of solar generation on site, and that is through our partnership with Alpha Structure. And the necessity of putting this on site again is because of the absence of a fueling infrastructure for hydrogen that would provide green hydrogen. In other words, if I were to put the fuel line into the existing infrastructure and mix it with other fuels, it would no longer be green. And our commitment, of course, is to do that. We are looking at future opportunities to generate hydrogen at other county facilities using solar power, with the possibility of then fueling tanks and then driving those fuel tanks to this site or other sites where we would have fueling facilities. This is in no ways we should expect the only hydrogen fueling facility this county will operate in the future. Next slide, the Gaithersburg Depot in particular that we're looking at here, as I mentioned, it's over 5 megawatts of solar with battery storage on site, and it will charge 30 electric buses as well as hydrogen buses, and include some fast chargers. That's the pantograph charger that you see referenced on the slide. Our fuel charge how many buses at a time?
So the pantographs only charge one bus at a time, but they charge a bus in about an hour. So you can go from empty to full in a 1 hour time frame.
as opposed to a standard charger, which would take hours to do. So we also have pantograph chargers at the Brookville depot as well that are charging buses as we speak. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this microgrid will provide electricity not only to produce hydrogen, but do bus charging, as well as provides power to the building itself. To the funding details you'll see on this slide, this basically outlines the source of the funding. The federal amount as it's broken down that you see, equaling $14.875 million. The balance of that, $13.7 million, will come through the county's portion will come through the bus fleet CIP, bus replacement CIP. As far as ongoing and operating costs, because I know this is a question that folks will have inevitably as they start thinking about this, the purchase of fuel cell buses there is higher than a standard diesel or CNG bus, and even more expensive by about $100,000 than an electric bus. But again, this is the cost of going green and getting away from a reliance on fossil fuels. The operating costs associated with these buses is outlined in the next page. Now, what's important here is that under the Infrastructure or Inflation Reduction Act, green hydrogen is eligible for what's called a producer's tax credit. And since we're a producer, it nets us $3 per kilogram of hydrogen produced, which is important when you look at the first two columns in either graph. The column to the left would be the cost of operating fuel cells without that Inflation Reduction Act incentive as a producer, which now reduces the cost of operating a fuel cell bus and makes it comparable to CNG and diesel buses. So, yeah.
Yeah, if I could stop you there. So you mentioned literally, trucking in or tanking in the hydrogen, but we're producing it ourselves?
We will be producing it on site at this location. Yes, I'll show you at the end a picture of what it may look like. But we will actually be producing hydrogen on this site and go directly to the fueling the buses there. We are looking at future sites, for instance, the Oaks landfill, where we're putting in multiple megawatt arrays now, ultimately can do over 30 megawatts of power generation at Oaks, which would be a great location again as a potential electrolyzer and producer. And then it's just a matter of tanking it and driving the tanks to our fueling depots. But for now, this will be a self-contained operation. And again, when we factor in the Inflation Reduction Act incentives, the cost of operating and maintaining hydrogen buses is very, very comparable to our current costs, or so it's estimated. Now, again, we haven't done this yet, so this is based upon statistics and research done by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and we're fairly confident that.
And to ask one more follow-up about the for how long this might go, right?
Yeah.
The current criteria. Do we know how long that tax credit exists? Is it in perpetuity, or is it a 10-year renewal? We don't know.
We don't know at this point. I know it was a part of the Infrastructure Reduction Act. From what I understand at this point, it is not subject to encumbrance. So unlike some of the other alternative fuels credits, where it was subject to encumbrance, and depending on the political divide in the country, you may be able to actually leverage it or not. This in the immediate short term, that's not an issue with this particular credit. Now, past that, I couldn't tell you.
Recognizing everything is at the whim of whomever the president and
course.
Congress or lack of leadership in Congress might be, but just even if everything was static, not that it's up for a 5-year renewal or anything like that. So that's why I just wanted to clarify.
But
Thank you.
I think the other thing to recognize is there is an increasing recognition that nationally our infrastructure is not up to speed with our ambitions. And so as long as there's I think this is an ongoing incentive to build up an infrastructure. You actually want to see more producers of hydrogen, and so you have to make it economically beneficial for them to do so. I would expect it'll stay for some time, but who knows?
Common sense, right?
Common sense isn't.
I let it dangle out.
Yeah, I know. All right, next slide, zero emission transition plan. Director Conklin also talked about their transitioning. If you want, it's an opportunity to add anything you want as far as the zero emissions transition plan for the fleet.
Well, we are working through that. We expect to have that plan done by the end of this calendar year. And what it's going to focus on is what fleet mix makes the most sense based on the service profile for the transit system. So it will identify that, a third of the service should be provided by battery electric, a third should be provided by hydrogen fuel cell, and a third by a fuel to be named later. But what that plan will do is set a long-term forecast between now and 2035 about what fleet acquisition efforts we need to make and what fueling system upgrades we need to make. So the first recommendation we expect to see from that is increasing the charging capacity at the Brookfield Depot, where we already have made a commitment to electric power and zero emission. We are likely to need a new bus facility, which the council approved some of the planning and design funds for in the last cycle, to replace the Nicholson Court Depot, which is leased. So we'll see that as a recommendation in this plan. And it will outline at 2035 what are the facilities that we need in place and the fleet we need in place to make that zero emission operation happen.
I think what's important, again, to underscore is the unchanging commitment to zero emissions and green technologies. As DGS is also constructing new buildings, all our buildings under construction are net zero. We have an absolute commitment to zero emissions in our fleet transition as well. The real issue, though, is anyone who drives an electric car knows about range anxiety, and so that's governing an awful lot of the decisions that really have to be made that Director Conklin already pointed out in his opening remarks. So we have to, and we also don't want to be dependent on a single technology or single fuel source. And having those options, coupled with our ability to generate on our own both electricity and hydrogen, really help us to be truly independent. And that's our goals in our planning, and that's what you see here. So this next slide, I promised a representative example. This is from the Champaign-Urbana hydrogen station. Ours will be similar in size, except that ours is going to be surrounded by solar photovoltaic panels empowering it. But this just gives you an idea of the footprint of something like this. It's kind of surprising, actually, with this footprint that it's not covered with solar panels. It should be, and ours will be. But this is sort of an example. You see the electrolyzer, the battery storage, and storage, the pipes, if you will, to the right there is what's holding the hydrogen under pressure, so that the fueling is actually much faster than any other type of fueling that we would have. Very comparable to diesel in that regard.
Correct.
All right, and that is Hydrogen Fueling 101. And certainly invite any questions and comments. I want to underscore and give thanks to both the staff at DOT and DGS who have been aggressive in this. Last comment I'll make is Montgomery County participated with a number of jurisdictions in the immediate Washington National Capital area in a bid for a hydrogen hub infrastructure. We were, both Calvin and my Chief Operating Officer, Jamie Cook, spent an inordinate amount of time preparing what I thought was a stellar presentation along with colleagues throughout the D.C. area. Yet we were unsuccessful. As you know, funding and major grants of this sort are often politically driven. And if you look and see where the three hubs that were awarded, it makes perfect political sense, although I think this was a lost opportunity on the Fed's part to highlight this in the immediate national capital area. But we're still looking for other opportunities, and we're undaunted in our pursuit of this infrastructure. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. and recognizing that 42% of our carbon emissions here in Montgomery County come from our transportation sector, and Ride-On is one of the largest transit fleets in the East Coast, so this makes a lot of sense. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Balcom, noting that Councilmember Stewart is following the conversation while we're talking about the future technology. We're lagging a little bit behind here at the council at this particular moment with a Zoom issue, but she's been following and has some questions that she's relayed to me, but we'll get to that after Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So it makes sense to have both technologies, new technologies going at the same time, and as they both continue to evolve, we're going to see improvements and maybe identify consequences that we didn't think of. So I think that's great. But I think it does, when you look at one of the reasons why this technology might be better than or comparable to the electric buses is the charging stations. And I think that that's a much bigger discussion that we have to have in terms of building out our charging station infrastructure, not only for residential, single occupancy vehicles, but also for major fleets. So that's a conversation for another day, but that did cross my mind. So one of the things I love about my job is I get to learn about things that I never ever thought that I would be learning about. And hydrogen buses is one of them. So where does the hydrogen come from? So we're producing the hydrogen. So what are the raw materials, and how do we get those raw materials?
Electricity and water. So the water will be coming in from the utility, from WSSC, through existing water lines that are already on property. The electricity will be coming from the solar generation. So in this particular project, because it's a green hydrogen project, the way that the site's configured is 100% of the electricity coming to produce the hydrogen will be green electricity. So it will be via solar.
And then the water, how much water are we talking?
It's about 5 gallons per kilogram is about what it takes to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen, about 5 gallons.
I'm assuming you've talked with WSSC about the adequate flow and
Right.
and
That was actually
capacity.
one of the first questions I asked when staff came to me. I said, we're going to have to pay for a new water line or an oversized, and there's adequate flow from the infrastructure, the WSSC infrastructure. Obviously, we're going to be using a fair amount of water, so we have yet to discuss, and we will discuss those volume increases with WSSC.
Right, and then,
Tomorrow we're having that conversation about WSSC
WSSC.
right to begin with.
Well, great.
right,
If I could fill out that answer just a little bit, there are 2 other ways to do it, neither of which we're doing, and a lot of people have had questions
Yeah.
about how you're generating the hydrogen along the lines that you have. One way is to convert natural gas, which there is natural gas on this site, but then again, it would not be green. And we committed in the federal grant that we would do green hydrogen for this project, so we're not converting natural gas to hydrogen. The other way, and you've seen this in some other large hydrogen demonstration areas, is to convert industrial ammonia to hydrogen fuel. And again, that's a chemical process based on other refining techniques and would not be green, and that is not what's being proposed here. So this is the most environmentally friendly way of doing the hydrogen generation.
Yeah, and it's really the only way to do it is a green technology.
and then are there any byproducts of the processing that we have to do anything with?
No, as I said, it's water and electricity, and the tailpipe emissions is water, and if you saw the electrolyzer G-Whiz model, it's taking the hydrogen atoms out, then recombining them with oxygen atoms on the back end. That's it. It's a closed loop.
Okay, so a ton of water comes in,
Right.
something happens.
Kind of
Hydrogen-
pointy hat with moons and stars on it. Waves them on.
Hydrogen comes out. There's no other water. I mean, it just,
Everything else is self-contained in the equipment, but it's compressed and chilled and stored and then pumped into the bus.
Yeah,
So-
if we went back to that slide just before this one, and you can look at that electrolyzer, those tubes in the center of the slide, That's what's storing the hydrogen gas and compressing it for the pumping into the vehicles.
Okay, just one last question. Let's assume this is great and it works and we're all happy. If it doesn't, how adaptable would this building be for other uses?
How adaptable would this particular, the electrolyzer, well, this is specifically designed for this purpose. Now, we also have on the MTOC site a natural gas fueling facility, and we're working with our partner Trillium to have this done. And Trillium is, should I say, on the hook. Trillium is aggressively pursuing this and in making this happen through our partnership. I don't think there's much opportunity for failure. The risk, perhaps, would be that our generation in volume of hydrogen somehow does not meet our expectations. And that's really a tweaking. That's an engineering answer. The technology is sound.
Okay, great, thank you. It's exciting.
It is exciting. And don't sell yourself short. You have a PhD, right? So might not be in
Chemical engineering?
in this, but you're qualified.
Do something.
I recently returned from a trip to South Korea for a very brief conference regarding innovation and technology. And during that trip, we visited K-STAR, which is Korea's fusion laboratory.
Yes.
Not quite ready for a PowerPoint presentation just yet, but their plan is hopefully in 10 to 20 years to be able to create a whole new source of energy from fusion. Very exciting.
It would certainly address range anxiety.
Yeah, right. It would. So that is further into the future. But I think, Director Conklin, you answered the question that Councilmember Stewart had, and she had messaged me during this presentation and said that wanted to make sure that this is green hydrogen and not the gray or blue or turquoise. I didn't know how many different colors there are, but you want to elaborate a little bit more?
Correct. I mean, the gray and blue hydrogens are ones that are either using water for blue plus a non-green energy source, which we're not doing that.
Yep.
And the gray are those industrial process-generated hydrogen fuel stocks either through natural gas or through ammonia, and we are not doing that. This is green energy plus water equals green hydrogen.
Perfect.
Just add to that, this is one of the challenges. Director Conklin mentioned the potential for renewable natural gas. Again, the technology exists, that's done, but putting it into a pipeline system, an infrastructure where it's mixing with gray natural gas is tantamount to a REC, a renewable energy credit. You're really not getting what you're expecting, and that's one of the challenges. This addresses, as you were just mentioning, Councilmember Glass, the whole issue of a need to rethink and revamp our national infrastructure.
We got a lot more work to do. I know the Moore administration is working on that as we start to receive some of this federal money to create the infrastructure that we need. And Councilmember Stewart had one final question as well, asking if there are any concerns with the supply chain for either the buses or the implementation of this technology.
I'm going to ask Mr. Jones to talk about supply chain. It is a challenge with the buses. Yes.
Supply chain right now is the bane of my existence. Between things that are happening with in the automotive industry as well as the battery electric industry, right? It's just supplies have been tough. As of right now, my understanding is that there should be no supply chain issues with getting the equipment and technology. The lead time is about 16 months on the electrolyzer. That's the longest lead time item in the project. But we've been meeting with the supplier every couple of weeks just to get an update on the industry, and that's about, they've held constant about that. They will be able to refine it once we're able to enter into a contractual agreement. They will be able to, be able to finalize the order, but they've been running about 16 months on the electrolyzer, but that's been the longest lead time item. Everything else is available.
And so, according to the timelines you have available, when would you hope this is up and operational?
So the 16 months works well for us. The microgrid won't be it. The microgrid construction will go about a year. So from March, it starts in March of 2024, and it won't finish until March 2025. So the hydrogen station would go on the back end of that project. So for us, the 16 months isn't an issue at this current time. It's not like we're up against it. Not until we get. If it goes on for a couple months, then it'll probably get tight. But as of right now, it's not an issue.
And both Trillium and Alpha Structure are aware of each other?
Correct.
This is not a sequential effort, this is a parallel. And we just met with Alpha Structure last week to get an update from them on their plans. And so that actually, in both of these partners they just look at us and say, is the county really committed to this? And I assured them that we are unequivocally committed to this.
Calvin, if you could just speak to the vehicle component of the project as well.
Yes. So the vehicle component to the project, on the battery electric side, it's been a long lead time, but not as much on the hydrogen fuel cell side. So on the battery electric side, right now it's running. I think it runs us almost 2 years out lead time for just, and the issue is batteries, right? So just being able to supply the batteries. On the hydrogen fuel cell side, they've been running about a year is what they've consistently gotten back to us.
Which is
and
a
told
typical
us,
bus build anyway.
Correct. It's in line with our typical bus build. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So if we get the buses before we get the other parts, is it possible, can we purchase fuel to
Short-term-
start the buses?
The short-term answer is yes. In the agreement that we're working on with Trillium, it'll be the capability to be able to provide, temporarily provide hydrogen. And the reason why we're putting it in the agreement is in order to commission the site, you need buses to be able to commission the site. And so in order to take out that variable, that variable on delivery, it's easier to just plan to have a temporary solution in place so that when you get the buses in, you can literally decouple the commissioning process. I can focus on commissioning the buses and working through the issues and challenges with the buses, and then as the site comes online, I'll be able to do the commissioning on the site. So,
It's not difficult.
Good question.
You're just seeing a large truck with a propane canister type thing on the
yeah.
bed.
Well, and they actually have the compression elements built in on the truck. Yeah, so you just bring it in, and they bring in delivery every day.
Well, this is exciting. The future starts now.
It does.
And appreciate you walking us through this. And when the request for the funds, the amendment came over, I knew that it was something we had not yet had a conversation about. I'm glad we did. And without objection, we'll support this and look forward to getting continual updates.
Absolutely.
On this project and whatever other scientific discoveries might be out there.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks.
Dr. Olin, is that it? That is it? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Super.
When you taught science class, kids in high school, right?
Yeah.
It is